Hello, I'm Father Patrick, founder of a website called ChristianArt, and today we're going to look at one of the most famous images in the whole of art history. Sunflowers by Vincent van Gogh is amongst his most iconic works, celebrated for its vivid yellows and emotional depth. In total, Van Gogh painted 11 versions, now in collections in Amsterdam, Munich, Tokyo and Philadelphia. But the version in London's National Gallery is the most famous and widely recognized. To me, this is a very Christian painting, and in this video we will explain how and why that is, that these towering flowers surrounding me here and in Van Gogh's painting ultimately invite us to turn our own gaze towards the light and towards God. Here we are in room 43 of the National Gallery, a room filled with Impressionist and Post-Impressionist art. The Impressionists were a group of French artists in the 1870s who broke away from the rigid conventions of academic painting. They reacted against the formal and highly finished style of previous decades. Instead, they wanted to break free from the shackles of convention and sought to capture the fleeting effects of light, color and movement, often painting en plein air or in the outdoors to depict the immediacy of what our eyes can see, mixing paints quickly and locking in colors with great immediacy in the moment onto the canvas. The movement gained its name somewhat mockingly from an art critic who reviewed Claude Monet's painting Impression Soleil Levant and derided it as merely a vague impression. He said, "Ce n'est pas un tableau, ce n'est qu'une impression." This is not a painting, it's merely an impression. And that French word impression stuck. And what began as an insult became the banner under which these artists, Claude Monet, Pierre-Auguste Renoir, Edgar Degas, and many others who are actually surrounding me here in this room, they transformed the course of modern art. But of all the paintings in this room that always draws a crowd, it's Sunflowers by Vincent van Gogh, a painting that, well, needs very little introduction. Painted in 1888, Sunflowers is one of the most widely reproduced images in the world. And yet seeing it up close is an entirely different experience. I don't know if you've ever stood before a very famous painting that you are seeing for the first time, having seen hundreds of images of it before online or in books. And yet when you stand in front of it, maybe you feel a little underwhelmed. Well, with this painting, it's completely the opposite. And the first thing you notice is the very thick application of paint onto the canvas. And if you think of an artist's paintbrush being the extension of the artist's soul, we can see that the paintbrush is trembling with urgency. The thick sculptural paste of the paint he applied to his sunflowers almost feels like he carved or he sculpted these sunflowers. This isn't gentle painting, no. It's fervent, frenetic, it's alive, giving the impression as if the sunflowers are not just painted, but they are growing out of the canvas itself. And yet, at the end of the day, well, it's just a painting of flowers in a vase. So how has this painting earned such a central place in the history of art? And as Christians, what, if anything, might it reveal to us about our own faith? Vincent van Gogh didn't grow up in an art studio. He grew up in a vicarage. He was born into a deeply Christian family in the Netherlands in 1853. His father, Theodorus van Gogh, was a Protestant pastor, and the rhythms of Christian life would have shaped Vincent from the very beginning. Morning prayers, Sunday worship, Bible readings, hymns sung in the quiet of the home, saying grace before meals, all of it left an imprint on the young boy's soul. Little Vincent grew up watching his father minister to the sick, preach from the pulpit, speak of mercy, grace, and the presence of God. These weren't just distant, abstract ideas. The Christian faith was the very heartbeat of his childhood, and that heartbeat echoes through every brushstroke in his art. In fact, as a young man, Vincent himself seriously explored a vocation to become a pastor just like his father. He studied theology informally and even went to Belgium to train as a missionary to coal miners. It is there that he preached, that he prayed, and he wanted to serve the poorest of the poor, sometimes giving away his own clothes. But over time, the desire to become a painter just grew stronger and stronger. This calling, this vocation became louder by the day. And though he had once hoped to preach with words, he began to feel that his vocation instead was to speak through images. Vincent's pastoral concerns are very present in his early work. He began by painting ordinary people, coal miners, weavers, peasants hunched over their evening meals, having little to eat. One of his first major works, The Potato Eaters, is a scene of rough hands and bowed heads, a painting as much about prayer and poverty as it is about art. These early paintings are not how we usually think of Van Gogh. They are painted in dark, earthly tones, in browns, beiges, blacks. And these works reflect his early years, raw, grounded, yet incredibly compassionate. These paintings were statements bringing to the fore the social injustices of the time. And Vincent was drawn to depict the dignity of ordinary people, and his palette matched the soil that these people toiled in. But this is not the Van Gogh that we associate him with today. We think of bursts of yellow, of swirling blues, of skies that dance, and sunflowers that blaze with light. That is the Van Gogh that the world fell in love with. So when did Vincent's art erupt from the shadows and move into these blazing colors that we all know him for? The turning point came when Vincent moved to Paris in 1886 to live with his brother Theo, who worked in an art gallery. There, Vincent encountered the work of the Impressionists and Post-Impressionists, artists like Monet, Seurat, Gogh, who were breaking all the old rules of color and light. It was as if a door opened. Van Gogh began to experiment boldly, replacing darkness with light, heaviness with movement. His brush no longer just captured the world, it shouted, it wept, it prayed in color. Color became his voice. But what about his faith? Did it altogether disappear in his work when he arrived in Paris? I'd like to think not. In the months before painting his sunflowers, he completed paintings such as Café Terrace at Night in Paris. And in this painting, Van Gogh uses a bright blue night sky set against this bright yellow terrace. And zooming in on the painting, it almost looks like a scene of the Last Supper, with Jesus in his white cloak standing in front of exactly the 12 disciples. Is it coincidence? Who knows? Also at sunset, again painted in the same year that our sunflowers were painted. Here, Vincent shows his mastery of color through the golden orb of the setting sun, illuminating the figure of the sower with almost a mystical light. When you see the painting from afar, the radiating sun almost looks like a monstrance. A burst of sunshine illuminating the fields underneath it and the sower, very much echoing the parable of the sower. At last, in August 1888, Van Gogh turned his gaze to a simple subject, sunflowers in a vase. And in doing so, he pushed the boundaries of painting even further. Here, he doesn't rely on a wide spectrum of colors, no. In these works, he devotes himself almost entirely to one color, yellow. Each sunflower pulses with life. Every petal and seed head seems to glow with energy, shaped by delicate contrasts of gold, ochre, amber, and lemon. To help us understand Vincent's use of yellow, I've come to meet British painter Tim Patrick, who, like the Impressionists, often paints en plein air. Hello, Tim.
Hi, Father. How you doing?
Good to see you.
And
yes.
you.
What are you working on at the moment?
So I come out here into this field of beautiful sunflowers, and I'm sort of trying to kind of get something of the luminosity, you know, of the yellows and the kind of vivacity of them. And to do that, I'm kind of doing something with a lot of the colours that, or contemporary versions of colours that Van Gogh had. So I'm using a cadmium yellow, which is a sort of metal-based yellow, and it's a really beautiful, vivid pigment. This is a cadmium yellow light, and this is a cadmium yellow deep. And you can see, so they're really luminous on the palette, and they're very different to a lot of the other colours maybe just before the time of Impressionism, like yellow ochre, which we put next to that. You know, is a much duller kind of earthy pigment.
Yes. I mean, even on the palette there, they literally jump out.
They ping, yeah,
yes,
yeah. And there's
yes,
always
yes.
something I say when I'm painting or teaching, and I sort of say, if you're painting a field of sunflowers, you know, your instinct is, oh, it's so light. You know, how do I make that light? And often people just chuck more white in there to make it brighter. But the phrase I often use is, you know, it's brighter, not whiter. And so Van Gogh, sort of with that same spirit, he's chocker full of colour, you know, so the painting is glowing and it's really rich.
I mean, we know that a lot of the Impressionist painters as well, when they went outside to paint en plein air, they did one painting here, and then 2 hours later they did a second painting, and they would probably paint like 3-4 canvases in a day. When
you go to a place and you take several canvases or something with you, you can sort of start one and the light changes and you move on, you do another one, and eventually you kind of settle on something that really feels like the face of the subject somehow. And I feel like Van Gogh is sort of iconic in that way, because he does so many iterations of one thing, and with the sunflowers especially, he painted several versions of that, and some he just painted from the painting of the sunflowers itself. He's able to kind of take a subject and maybe sometimes take a subject that feels quite ordinary or overlooked, and he's able to kind of elevate it somehow, and it's sort of like the alchemist trick of turning lead to gold. And he's able to make us look through the amount of care he poured into his subjects.
I mean, in this video, we've also been talking and touching upon the faith of Van Gogh, because it's not necessarily, I mean, like the sunflowers, it's not necessarily Christian art yet. What do you see in his work that you could extract for your own sort of faith life?
Oh, so much. And I think for me, that's a really beautiful quality about Van Gogh, and it sort of escapes orbit in some ways of kind of tropes and sort of symbology maybe that had previously been used in ecclesiastical work or something, because Van Gogh is sort of the fulcrum of his existence, understanding in the world is around God and faith, and but he's sort of doing this sort of alchemical trick of kind of turning lead to gold. He's finding sort of quite quotidian, everyday things or stuff that's outside of what we might imagine are subjects to do with faith, but really it's about his perception in the world and his belief and his love of creation. And I think it's quite special that for a lot of maybe artists who do have a faith and are interested in that, because it's a way of it's a way of kind of saying, go out and contemplate your world, you know, go and sort of attend to the things in your life, and through your attention, like the way Van Gogh was doing, sort of they can be transformed. So that's quite special, I think.
Despite the vibrant beauty and colour of his work, Van Gogh lived with profound darkness, struggling especially with mental illness, self-loathing, and the feeling that his life had little meaning. At the time of his death, aged just 37, he was virtually unknown, having sold only a handful of paintings, mostly to friends and family. In the wake before his funeral, his body was laid out in the small upstairs room of the inn where he'd been staying. The space was filled with his paintings, and friends brought sunflowers. One of the sayings attributed to the artist was, "The sunflower is mine." a phrase that can hold many meanings, but perhaps alludes to the mystery and spirit of this subject, one that ultimately brought him peace, solace in a world he struggled to live in. It's clear that the sunflower meant a great deal to Van Gogh. And I think as Christians, there is a lot we can say about this flower. Maybe Van Gogh's vase with these sunflowers is much more than just a painting. Perhaps it's a kind of prayer. A prayer, yes, without words, where each flower almost represents us. Some flowers look battered, some of them are drooping, some even have their backs turned towards us, some are fully flourishing, but each all uniquely shaped, all of them trying to lean and trying to find the light. These luminous sunflowers remind us that holiness is not about perfection. Holiness is about orientation, like these flowers, trying to turn again and again towards the light of God. And in a world wanting signs and proof of God, with sometimes, yes, little space for mystery, perhaps this is the very miracle that we overlook. That God is present in the simple vase on the table, in the flower that turns quietly towards the sun, and in the soul that reaches silently for His light and guidance. Even in this vase of fading blooms, there is glory. God being present in the ordinary as much as in the extraordinary. We hope you enjoyed watching this video on Van Gogh's sunflowers. So please leave any comments and share your thoughts in the comment section below. And thank you so much, Tim, for giving us a glimpse into the world of paintings. Now, how are you getting on? It's shaping up. And if you haven't already, head over to www.christian.art and sign up to receive our daily email, where I pair the gospel reading of the day with a work of art and write a short reflection, exploring beauty to grow closer to God.